From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Let me throw out some numbers for you that really demonstrate where the Big Ten and the SEC sit going into bowl season, going into the postseason, and of course, going in to the 4-team college football playoff. 12 of the 13 teams, the top 13 in the final college football playoff rankings next season will either be Big Ten members or SEC members. Out of the New Year's 6, 4 out of the 6 games in the conference affiliations that start in 2024 will be Big Ten versus SEC matchups. So 4 out of those 6 New Year's 6 games this season. Oregon is in the Fiesta Bowl. Georgia is in the Orange Bowl. So that makes 10 out of the 12 teams that qualified for the New Year's 6 this season will either be Big Ten members or SEC members next season. The two on the outside looking in of those conferences, Liberty, the Group of 5 representative, and Florida State. And if reports are to be believed, maybe Florida State would be joining that group sooner than later. This season is the bridge, I think, to the future of college football. and that is the age of the Power Two, the growing resources that teams and programs will continue to have in the Big Ten and the SEC. You're going to see them be able to compete at a higher level, at this playoff and national championship caliber level, maybe compared to some of those teams in the ACC or the Big 12. Not saying that the Big 12 teams or the ACC teams or some of these other teams won't be able to compete. But you look at the programs, you look at the names in the Big 10 and the SEC right now and where they're at this season as we look to the future of 2024, it is clear that this season is paving the way for the future of college football. Let's focus on the college football playoff, the ultimate Big Ten versus SEC battle. And the first matchup, of course, that we're going to focus on is the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl game. College football playoff semifinal number 1. Of course, it pits the undefeated Big Ten champions, the Michigan Wolverines, the top-ranked team in all of college football. They are going up against the champions of the SEC, the Alabama Crimson Tide, the team that ended Georgia's 29-game win streak, the team that allowed the Minnesota Golden Gophers fans to pop the champagne as they remain the last three-peat national champion in college football history. You know, when I look at this Rose Bowl and I really start to break this thing down and look at both of these teams, I see a lot of similarities between both the Michigan Wolverines and the Alabama Crimson Tide. They have a quarterback that can get around a little bit. J.J. McCarthy, we know his ability to run. Of course, Jalen Milroe on the other side for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I see some good defenses, and Michigan might be a little bit better than Alabama statistically, but I see really good talent on both sides of the ball, both sides on the defensive side of the football. I see physical football teams. You know, I know Nick Saban has kind of evolved. You know, you look at that 2020 team with Mac Jones and Devontae Smith and how they're able to throw it all around the yard. And I know the SEC has really been evolving, you know, with the pass game in modern day college football. But I think in their heart of hearts, Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh, they want to be physical football teams. They want to be hard-nosed. And when I look at these teams, I kind of see that from both Alabama and Michigan, at least from what I've seen so far from Alabama. I took a look at their game in the second half against the Georgia Bulldogs, and I saw a team that went nose-to-nose with a Georgia team that maybe has been the most physical team in the country these last few seasons. In this matchup, Michigan, you have got to be aware of Dallas Turner, right? We have talked about, right, ever since the injury to Zach Zinter, this last game in the Big Ten championship game with Iowa was kind of the first full game without Zach Zinter. And you saw what Iowa did. You saw how they kind of schemed around it a little bit, didn't you? Dallas Turner, 13.5 tackles for loss, 9 sacks. Is Alabama going to figure out a way to scheme up some openings to get free against this Michigan offensive line with the shuffling that they've had, now moving Carson Barnhart to the inside of that offensive line? That's something certainly to watch out for. Michigan needs to find a way to contain Dallas Turner in this game. Can Michigan run the football? Will Michigan be able to line up at the line of scrimmage and go at Alabama's defense? You look at the Big Ten title game against the Michigan Wolverines, against the Iowa Hawkeyes, Michigan versus Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. Iowa did a really good job at stacking up at the line of scrimmage and containing and bottling up this Wolverines run game. Can Alabama turn on that Iowa tape and do some very similar things? Those are questions you know are going to have to be answered as well. Alabama, 23rd in the country against the pass. They're 31st in the country against the run. I have this in capital letters. I have this in bold letters that I'm looking at on my notes right now. Contain Jalen Milroe. You can't let the Alabama quarterback run game go wild. You need to find a way to bottle that up. Keep it between the tackles. If I am those edge guys on the outside, the Josiah Stewarts, the Jalen Harrells, the Braden McGregors, guys like that, you need to keep contained. I grew up in grade school and high school, right? Fairly elementary style level of football, and I played defensive end, and it's all about keeping contained. wider than the widest. That's what Michigan, especially in this matchup against Alabama and Jalen Milroe, I look around at this offense. All right? And I see some decent players. I see some good players. But I think the largest threat, it seems, is the running ability and the legs of Jalen Milroe. If they can keep that contained, I think the Michigan Wolverines have a really solid shot at winning this football game. Alabama has some good personnel. They have some good players. They've got some future NFL players in that secondary. We've seen at times J.J. McCarthy. We saw it against Maryland. Remember, there were back-to-back passes on that drive late in the first half. One of them was dropped. The other one was caught in the end zone for an interception. We saw it last year, 2 pick sixes against TCU. We even saw it in the Big Ten championship game against Iowa where they dropped an interception. There are times when J.J. McCarthy doesn't make the best decisions. And you know Alabama wants to get that J.J. McCarthy. Michigan needs to have the good J.J. McCarthy in this football game as well. This is going to be an epic battle between the Michigan Wolverines and the Alabama Crimson Tide. The current Big Ten versus SEC battle champions going at it in the Rose Bowl. It is going to be a fantastic setting, no question about that. Now, as we look towards the future of 2024, that's where the Sugar Bowl comes in. You've got the undefeated 13-0 Washington Huskies, future Big Ten member, champions this season, the final champions of the Pac-12, going up against the third-ranked 12-1 Big 12 champions, future SEC member, Texas Longhorns. This is the battle for the future. One of these teams is going to be able to claim a victory and say, look around the rest of this conference, the one that they're going into in 2024, they're going to be able to look at the very least, a majority of the conference, depending on who makes it in this one and who makes it in the other semifinal. And they're going to be able to say, we played for the national championship right when they step into their new conference in 2024. We played for the national title, and most of you did not. And they're going to be able to carry that momentum into their new league in 2024. Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? I mentioned maybe good defenses, physicality, stuff like that in that matchup in the Rose Bowl. When I look at the Sugar Bowl between Washington and Texas, could we have kind of the flip side of the Michigan-Iowa game? And that is great quarterbacks and a lot of scoring. We know about these quarterbacks. Michael Penix Jr., when he is on, he is one of the very best in all of college football. Quinn Ewers on the other side for Texas is pretty darn good as well. Both of these offenses have really good wide receivers out on the perimeter. And when you look at defenses, these aren't exactly the greatest in the world like teams like Michigan or Alabama. Texas is 95th in the country in pass defenses. There were teams this year in the Big 12 that were able to move the football down the field, that were able to score some points on the Texas Longhorns. And although Washington had a better performance against Bo Nix and the Oregon Ducks in the Pac-12 championship game, this is still a defense that, was not one of the Pac-12's best defensive units out there. And in theory, teams can move the ball up and down the field. Look what USC was able to do in that game at the Coliseum, putting up 42 up there on the Washington Huskies. So this game could be back and forth and back and forth. Remember that Rose Bowl a few years back, Baker Mayfield for Oklahoma going up against Georgia, where they went up and down the field. I could see that possibly happen in New Orleans here in this Sugar Bowl game. Here's one thing to keep in mind. Because because Michigan was the number 1 seed, they get the pick of where they wanted to play. They go to the traditional site for the Big Ten champion. They go to the Rose Bowl. So then the other game takes place in whatever the other semifinal site that is that year. This year, it's the Sugar Bowl. Okay, it's not exactly a friendly traveling location, not exactly a travel-friendly trip for Washington fans going down to the Bayou to New Orleans. For Texas, for fans in Austin, that's not too bad of a drive. That's pretty good. That's doable for them. Could this be a home field advantage for the Texas Longhorns? That's something to look out for. You saw in Vegas when Washington fans show up, they can make a difference. You've seen it this year, the greatest setting in college football, as they call it there in Seattle. Washington fans make the trip. This could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the Huskies. Make the trip create at the very least a 50-50 environment. I believe Texas, you got to get pressure on Michael Penix. And I think the same for Washington on Quinn Ewers. Which defense is going to get more pressure on the other? Which quarterback is going to be more uncomfortable? Or is this just going to be a 52-49 game? Whoever's the football last scores. All right, you look at the Texas passing attack. Xavier Worth, Adonai Mitchell combined for 15 touchdowns, just over 1,700 yards this season. Washington held Oregon's threats in check. Guys like Tez Johnson and Troy Franklin. I know Troy was kind of banged up in that game. Can they do the same with the Texas Longhorns? I think that's certainly something that needs to be talked about. But this is a Washington team. I look at Texas, and I think Washington can beat Texas if they play their best. Getting that run game going with Dylan Johnson like they did, getting that offensive line pushing forward ahead, I think is another key part to winning this game, possibly limiting the possessions that Texas has in this game. But I think for a different reason, this is still going to be an outstanding matchup as well. So you've got future Big Ten and SEC, current Big Ten and SEC, but this just expands further than just the college football playoff as well. This expands to the New Year's Six and the rest of bowl season as well. In the New Year's Six, the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, Penn State and Ole Miss, man, they have been back-to-back in the rankings. It seems like this whole season, these are two of the best multi-loss teams in college football, and they have been that way for a good amount of time in the back half of this season, in the month of November, for both Penn State and Ole Miss. Penn State, physicality, run game. We'll see if they open it up a little bit with Drew Aller. I've caught Ole Miss a few times. I caught him on Thanksgiving night. Haven't been overly impressed with the Rebels. I'm not going to lie. I believe Penn State can win this game in the Peach Bowl, but you got to get Drew Aller going into all of these games. Now that we're out of the playoff, all these games depend on opt-outs. What's the wide receiver situation going to be like? Are we going to have Keandre Lambert-Smith? Are we going to have Dante Cephas? Those are big questions. If we do, I feel pretty good about Penn State. I feel really good about Penn State's defense matching up and causing problems with Ole Miss. I saw what Mississippi State was able to do for a lot of that game on Thanksgiving night, and I feel pretty confidently about what the Nittany Lions can possibly do in Atlanta. You move down to the Cotton Bowl, I just think Ohio State is more talented than Missouri. Right, all due respect, Missouri going 10-2 is no small feat out there in the SEC. Right, but they had to kick a field goal late to beat Kansas State in overtime, or at least late in that game. That was a big thing at the time. Maybe as time goes by, maybe it's less impressive. But I just think Ohio State has more talent. Even you're going to see opt-outs, but now is the time where you're going to see some of these Ohio State wide receivers have to step up. The depth of talent in the wide receiver room could be on full display. How about freshman Carnell Tate getting more involved? Some of these true freshmen, 3 out of the top 5 in last year's class committed and are on this Ohio State team. Let's see them go to work. I just think there's more talent across the board, but I could see opt-outs hitting Ohio State hard. I'd have to look more into where Missouri is at in terms of upperclassmen, but it just seems to me like the Buckeyes just have more talent. Let's see Kyle McCord get in rhythm and really move the ball up and down the field. Kind of a contrast of styles between the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Tennessee Volunteers. We know all about Iowa. We know all about their defense. Tennessee and Josh Heupel, we kind of know what they're about on the offensive side of the ball. Can Iowa this game up enough to get out of this thing with a win over Tennessee? I've been watching these rankings. I think Tennessee is one of the most overrated teams in the college football playoff rankings. We'll see if Iowa, look at that, an 8-4 record out there for the Volunteers. That screams SEC bias. But I look at this thing for Iowa. Let's see you take it to them and be physical, especially on defense. Bring the heat. ReliaQuest Bowl. All right, when we talk about opt-outs, this is going to have some pretty big ones, because if this doesn't have opt-outs down there in Tampa, this is a scary game for Wisconsin, and not in a good way. Right, Jaden Daniels in that offense, even though the Tiger defense is not great, right? This is not a great matchup, right, for Wisconsin against LSU. Pre-opt-outs. Post-opt-outs, let's see what happens. Of course, no Braylon Allen for Wisconsin, and we're assuming no Jaden Daniels for LSU. Maybe that could even the playing field a little bit for Wisconsin. I could see Tanner Mordecai really moving the ball against this not great LSU defense. That is one game where opt-outs is really going to sway the game. That is going to be an unpredictable ball game in my humble Big Ten opinion. And then, of course, the Music City Bowl, finishing this Big Ten SEC Bowl extravaganza up Maryland. Okay, while you were focused on conference championship games, while you were focused on the college football playoff, quietly, Maryland lost one of their best receivers in Corey Dyches, lost their top defender and linebacker, Jayshon Barham, both to the transfer portal. Those are big losses, folks. Those are big losses, right? And you could see some opt-outs if they don't have Taulia Tagovailoa. I have a feeling that Taulia, considering the amount of time and effort he's put into Maryland football, I would believe he would play in this bowl game. And you look at Auburn. Auburn's a team right now this is a team that lost to New Mexico State. All credit in the world to New Mexico State and Jerry Kill, right? We love him. At least we should love him here in Minnesota, in Gopher land, despite his relationship with PJ Fleck and what he's said in the past. That's still a good team, but as Auburn, you got to beat New Mexico State. You got to beat New Mexico State at home. That's why they schedule those cupcakes, right, late in the season, is to win those games. I believe pretty strongly that despite opt-outs, despite transfers, Maryland can get the job done. But it remains to be seen what exactly is going to happen going forward. Folks, the Big Ten and SEC power play is in full effect with those bowl games. With the Sugar Bowl game, Washington and Texas, and then with that Rose Bowl game as well between the Michigan Wolverines and the Alabama Crimson Tide. This bowl season could say a lot in terms of what we see going forward with the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams in 2024. All right, folks, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun bowl season, and you know who we're rooting for at this channel. You know what type of content you're going to see leading up until these things really go down. Of course, the playoff is where everybody's focused. I want to say it this way. Because I'm sure it'll come up at some point. Florida State. Of course, they're kind of, they're in the ACC. I generally, of course, what all it is on this channel. We like to talk Big Ten. Of course, that's what the channel is all about. That's where my passion lies. Florida State, did they get screwed? That's kind of the big talking point right now within college football. Why do you play the games, right? 13-0. Look, I get your quarterback goes down, but this screams SEC bias. And here's what I want to say. For everything. The criteria is the 4 best teams. We can talk about how crappy the criteria is and the whole system of a group of ADs and former players and all these guys scrambled together. Hey, let's just handpick these 4 teams. People have thrown out it's an invitational. It's absolutely an invitational. It always has been for the last 10 years. I'm glad we have some type of automatic qualifiers going forward in 2024. All right, where you know what you have to do. Florida State, you know what you have to do. You win the ACC, you're in. All right, especially next year with the 5+7 format. ACC win, they're in. Big 12 win, you're in. That's just how these things are going to go. All right? So we're going to get there eventually in 2024. As for this year, if you're saying the 4 best teams, even though, like me, you might disagree with that whole concept, Alabama right now is a better team than Florida State. It's crappy. It's frustrating for the Noles. I put it out on Twitter. If I am constructing this playoff, I am putting Florida State in there because you're setting a horrible precedent if you put an undefeated team in a New Year's Six bowl that is not the college football playoff. And it won't matter. Here's the thing. Everybody's up in arms. Everybody's freaking out about it. And that's fine. That's cool. Right? You do you. But we're going to be arguing about 3 lost teams and 4 lost teams next season. These arguments, yeah, we're maybe going to have arguments with matchups. Oh, this team should have been 6 when they were 8 and all that stuff. And it's going to be maybe more about the matchups than anything. But next season, now that the Pac-12 doesn't exist, that will open up an extra at-large spot. We're not going to be talking about this as much. Undefeated teams won't be left out of the playoff. So if you go to the committee and Boo Corrigan, right, says, well, we won't have this problem in the future. We won't. Which is true to a certain extent, but in my opinion, that should not excuse. Because I believe this is all politics. If you don't think it's all politics, I don't think you know the game. Okay, because if the college football playoff, a tournament which has exclusive broadcast rights, with the 4-letter network that shall not be named, and you leave out the conference that's about to sign a exclusive deal with that network, it ain't going to go well. It ain't going to go well with your TV partner. It's not going to go well, of course, with that conference. Now, I'm going to give the SEC all the credit in the world. They have won on the football field, and I'm going to say this now, and I'm going to say this through the month of December as we lead forward to some of these bowl games that I just talked about, and then some of these playoff games and some of these other bigger games. Big Ten, man, I'm getting goosebumps. I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about it. Big Ten, you got to win. You got to win on the field this postseason. You can't go 0 for 2 in the playoff. We're counting Washington as a Big Ten member right now. You cannot, I repeat, you cannot go 0 for 2. That's where the SEC continuously has gotten on their high horse, and you can't argue with them because they've won on the field. They've won national championship after national championship. You can talk about bias. You can scream it from the rooftops of, they're getting into that situation because of the bias. Okay, I can meet you there. But the Big Ten last season had a golden opportunity. Michigan and Ohio State was there on a silver platter for the ultimate rematch in the national championship. Michigan didn't get it done against TCU. We can argue about that targeting call in the game that got Marvin Harrison Jr. knocked out of the game, right? I think Ohio State had to settle for a field goal instead of going in for a touchdown at that point, blowing that lead late. You have to win these football games to change the narrative. We know that the narrative needs to be changed here in B1G country. We know who we are. Okay, we know that the bias over here exists. And when you have the network that just signed an exclusive deal with the SEC as the exclusive broadcast partner of the playoff, I think that is one of the big no-nos for me right now. We need multiple networks at the table. I don't know if we're going to see CBS or NBC. I think we're definitely going to see Fox get involved in this in 2026. But we need multiple networks and multiple voices broadcasting Final Fours, broadcasting national championships, things like that. We need Fox involved. We can't have one conference's network, an exclusive deal, also having an exclusive deal over the college football playoff. I just that's not healthy for the sport. That's not healthy for the game. It's not healthy for anybody. It's not good for anybody. Okay, we need diversity in this game, not only maybe in teams in the playoff, but possibly in networks as well. I think that's going to help because we know you everybody here knows it. Everybody watching this on demand knows it. Everybody anywhere knows it at any time. We can't have this looking over everything. We just can't have it. We just can't have it. That's just the cold, hard truth as well in this game. The Big Ten, it comes down to winning these postseason games. That's where all these SEC people, they look at you and they make fun of you and they say, we win all the time, and you can't argue with them. Golden opportunity last season, didn't get it done. this season. Michigan, as good as a team as you've maybe had in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Certainly since 2006, probably since the season which they shared the national title in 1997 with Nebraska. Michigan, and this is not one of Nick Saban's best teams. Not creating any controversy by saying that. It's not. It's not. This is a great Michigan team. They need to beat Alabama. They need to. They need to. Michigan needs to win. I was going for a walk before this, and I was talking to my wife, and I'm like, I'm gonna be what I call, I'm gonna be in the Jim Harbaugh position. Right? I'm going to be like that, 2 feet away from the TV and that Rose Bowl at all times. Because I am that invested in this game. I am not usually, right, from my stance and my channel, I generally take right? I generally like to be fairly calm, cool, and collected, even though I do get emotional and hyped up about some of these games. Michigan, man, you got to win. You have to win. You have to. I think they're the better team. But that's what I'm going to look more at Alabama film. I'm going to go back and look at some full games before I really break this thing down a week before New Year's Day. Got to win. Got to win. If Texas beats Washington, I don't want that to happen. I want to see Michigan and Washington. If Texas beats Washington, I can live with it. But Michigan's got to win. Okay, and we all know what's happening off the field with Michigan, right? Who knows how much longer this title's going to last when all is said and done? At this point, I don't care. At this point, I don't care. Win a football game. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at right now. All right, folks. Got a little hyped up there. Got a little bit hyped up. Let's get to some comments. Our guy LFG chiming in here. He is in here as well tonight. Tony Turntable, that is a fantastic name if I ever saw one. Big Ten versus SEC. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. It's going to be fun to see this all go down. I'm excited to see actually some of these other games kind of go down. If you're kind of just coming into the chat, coming into the show right now, here are some of the games that we see, non-playoff bowl games between the Big Ten and the SEC. I think there's some really good matchups. If I'm just throwing darts at the wall right now, and I know I'm going to look more into these games will get previewed, okay, and we are going to talk about them in future shows on this channel. If I'm throwing darts at the wall right now, I feel pretty good about those New Year's Six games. I feel pretty good about Penn State, and I feel pretty good about Ohio State. ReliaQuest Bowl, I don't feel great about my Badgers against the LSU Tigers. Citrus Bowl, I don't feel great about Iowa, right? I just don't. I just don't. You know, their offense. We know all about their offense. I don't need to beat a dead horse there. Maryland and Auburn, I think that one's fairly up in the air as well. I think you could see, and this is an odd number, right? 5 games in this between the Big Ten and the SEC. I could see something like I feel pretty good about the Nittany Lions and the Buckeyes. And then the Big Ten just needs to win one more to take 3 out of 2. I would probably say the best chance to get their third would probably be Maryland. LSU with opt-outs, that seems pretty difficult for me against the Wisconsin Badgers. Iowa, I got to look more into Tennessee's defense. I got to look more into Tennessee right now. They're not the Hendon Hooker Tennessee, of course, from last season. They've taken a drop down on that side of things. So I got to do a little bit more research, look into that before that game really takes place on New Year's Day. If their defense is not good, maybe Iowa can move the football. Maybe Iowa can just run the ball and just jam it down Tennessee's throat. And then their defense steps up and does what Iowa does. So all of these games depend on opt-outs. We all know that as well. And then I want to sit here and take off my Big Ten sunglasses. You know I want to do that. But I mean, right now, if I'm picking, I'm probably going Michigan and Washington, and that might do more that I haven't seen a ton of Alabama. I haven't seen a ton of Texas. I've seen a little bit of them. I know generally what those teams are and who they are. I'm more nervous about Michigan because of what happened last season. But you have to know. You have to 2 straight losses in the semifinal. Everybody came back to Michigan for this moment, for this game. This is why this is a last dance. Why Harbaugh came back and didn't go to the Broncos. Why Blake Corum came back. Why some of these offensive linemen came back. Why all these guys came back for one last dance. I've been saying that since the summer. This is a last dance season. Now with all the off the field stuff, it's really a last dance type of season as well. All right, let's get to some more comments as well. I see some Michigan. I see some maize and blue avatars, which we like to see as well. Michigan versus the world chiming in. Maryland, Stepping Stone Developmental Program. I think you're referring to the transfer stuff with Corey Dyches and Jay Sean Barham. Chop Robinson came from there. I believe Chop Robinson was from the DMV area as well. It's tough because, especially now with USC, with Oregon, with some of these better West Coast, Washington, freaking number 2 team in the country, with Washington coming in, are you going to see some of these teams almost be AAA teams, right? Look how many transfer departures Purdue has had so far. So there's going to be a lot of this. I think you're going to see. That's why I mentioned at the top, you don't want to talk about stepping stone developmental? Look at the resources that the Power 2 is going to have, the SEC and the Big 10. You can look at the Big 12 and look at the ACC. That's the stepping stone. As you go to 2024, 2025, we're going to have a new playoff contract in 2026. I think you're really going to start to see the gap. You're really going to start to see it. And I got Big 12 friends. I got ACC friends, more Big 12 friends than ACC friends. And I want to see them succeed. But when I look at the Big 12 right now, who's your recruiting power? Utah? Baylor? You need talent. Colorado? In theory, it's Deion. Deion is, I looked at 12th or 13th in the Big 12, 16 teams right now in recruiting. You got players decommitting. You got coaches leaving. I'm not sure if Deion at Colorado is going to be what people think they want it to be. Casey Mallory, resident Hawkeye fan, one of our resident Hawkeye fans coming in, Braylon Allen. He is gone for the draft, so he won't be there as well. Michigan is now number 1. Craig Robinson checking in here as well this evening. Got to shout out my guy, Trojan Blade over there, covering all things USC. The bias is real. Okay, I got to mention this as well because I was kind of busy today. I had a couple of times where I wanted to DM a couple of my West Coast buddies. I got to talk about this. I see USC fans, I see Oregon fans, Washington. I see a lot of these people coming into the Big Ten, and they're talking about this bias and all this stuff. And we've got this. I'm so glad to be done with Pac-12 refs. Have you ever seen a Big Ten game? Do you know? I'm not sure if you're getting that much better going from Pac-12 officiating to Big Ten officiating. So I just want to warn all of our West Coast friends coming into the league next season that you think you're getting something. I just wanted to point that out. Let's just say I just wanted to point that out as well. All right, let's get to some more comments here as well. Georgia all the way down to number 6. I put my shoulders up and say, where do you want me to put them? Where do you want me to put them? It's hard. It's hard. Or at least according there to Craig as well. You got Florida. I think Florida State was at 5. And Georgia was at number 6, I think was the final rankings. We'll take a look at that as well. Trojan Blade also saying, if SC beats Louisville, does that count as a big bowl win? Now, it's not a Big Ten versus SEC, right? That's the big battle that at least I'm concerned without. Unfortunately, it doesn't count quite yet. It doesn't count quite yet as much as I would like it to out there. Of course, you've got former Purdue coach, Jeff Brom, is coaching over there at Louisville, so you got all kinds of kind of dabbling in some Big Ten games. I believe that's a Holiday Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be wrong on that one. But we want to see USC light it up. I want to see Malachi Nelson play. I thought the Fiesta Bowl would be an audition for Ty Thompson coming in at Oregon. Bo Nix says he's going to play. I kind of feel bad a little bit for Ty because I think he wants his opportunity to prove that Oregon does not need to go get a transfer quarterback, that he can be the guy for the Ducks going forward. But now with Bo Nix playing this Fiesta Bowl, he's not really going to get that opportunity. Not going to get that opportunity. Trojan Blade, he's counting it anyway. He's counting it. We'll take it. We'll take it. I appreciate the West Coast fans because in the comments and tweets and stuff, I've seen a couple schools of thought with some of these West Coast teams. Some of them are taking the Trojan Blade approach to all of this and saying, we're a member of the Big Ten now that we're not playing any Pac games, bowl season, we're recruiting, we're getting ready for the Big Ten. I've seen some comments says, I'm not going to watch the Big Ten. I'm a Washington fan. I'm a USC fan. I'm an Oregon fan. I'm a Pac fan. I don't like this. Which I respect that opinion. I get that opinion. But this is the future, and I'm a traditional guy. I wish all conferences had 9 or 10 teams within them, but that's not the reality that we're living in. I need maybe to do a better job of living in reality. This has been, I'm not going to lie, it's been a sad weekend. The SEC and CBS saying goodbye. The Big Ten West saying goodbye. Big Ten East doesn't have as much pride. We got a lot of pride out of our teams here in the Big Ten West. Big Ten West saying goodbye. TV really flipping over next season with ESPN taking over the last of the 4-team college football playoff. There's just so much change. So much. I've never seen so much change, and it's not even close. It's not even close. I think the playoff is going to be a positive eventually. I think, and then having the video game coming back, I think is maybe could bring some people back. Of course, really engage the younger generation of college football fans as well. From Daniel, going to be a battle. It's going to be a battle with Alabama. It is going to be a physical, no-nonsense type of battle between two of the best coaches of this generation, college football coaches of this generation. Nick Saban, of course, probably the GOAT right over there at Alabama, taking on Jim Harbaugh. We've got a Washington fan in here tonight. I'm hoping, I'm praying. I think Washington has a good shot to beat Texas. How would they fare against a more physical team like Alabama and Michigan? I'm not sure, right? But they fared pretty well against Oregon. So we'll see. Daniel saying picking the under right now in the Citrus Bowl. I got to look up what the under is right now. The over under for that game is very intriguing to me. Very intrigued about what the over under might be over there in the Citrus Bowl between Tennessee and Iowa as well. Like I said, I got to do a little bit more research. I got to look a little bit more into things for Tennessee, right? Tennessee's kind of one of those teams that I haven't really been able to get my eyes on a lot this season. There's a lot of Big Ten games and a lot of these time slots, right? So it's kind of hard to get eyes on some of these other programs. Right now, the over-under is 36.5. We got 36.5, and I'm going to pull up the screen capture here to really display that. So right there, you see Iowa and Tennessee, noon Eastern in the Citrus Bowl. Nothing goes together like Cheez-Its and fruit, right? So you got Iowa and Tennessee over there. Minus 7.5 for the Volunteers against the Iowa Hawkeyes. 36.5 as well. So we'll see if Iowa can make that a defensive football game. We'll see if the Hawkeyes can run the football. Maybe they can run the football right at Tennessee, and maybe they can do some things over there and moving the ball that way. Michigan versus the world coming in. Nobody can feel great about Iowa. Hey, they faced a really good Michigan defense. They faced a really good Michigan defense. Boy, okay, so I am a I guess now I'm a casual wrestling fan. And of course, for those of you others that are, you saw hell freeze over last week when CM Punk came back to WWE. We've got hell freezing over right now in the chat. Big Ten TED Champions Club member Jared Jones saying go blue. That's been a debate on Twitter today. I've been kind of scrolling through it. Do you cheer for your conference rivals? If your rivals is Oregon cheering for Washington, Ohio State for Michigan, at least in the case of our guy Jared, he's saying go blue. Wow. I thought I would never see that. I thought I would never see that. That is, that's something. Thank you, Jared, for being a part of the show. Thank you I'm sure that was not easy to type out and click enter, but I appreciate you did, and I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate you coming aboard once again here this evening. I got my guy Don checking in here tonight. Good to hear from you, Don. ACC is shafted. Who would you boot from the 4? Well, the committee said it came down to Alabama and it came down to Florida State. If you go undefeated, and someone brought up the point. I don't know if it was Booger McFarland. I forgot who it was on the selection show, but they said to go with a third-string quarterback and have that defense play the way they did against Louisville, something's got to be said about that defense. In the Big Ten, we know all about it with Iowa. We know all about it. Okay, that defense being so good and the offense not being as good. Florida State has been put into a similar situation where a lot of pressure has been put on their defense. I watched part of that Florida game. They stepped up. Florida didn't have Graham Mertz, former Wisconsin quarterback, in that game as well. But a lot of pressure has been put on their defense. The defense has stepped up. It's just me, but I'm throwing in Florida State. You see this logo here. You see that logo there. You can probably imagine why I'm not exactly chomping at the bit to put Alabama in the playoff over an undefeated FSU. And FSU, okay, there's been a lot of realignment. Man, did that heat up. Man, am I hearing some things about Florida State, about some of the other members in the ACC, because I think the other members in the ACC are kind of scared right now because of what's happening at FSU. Okay, we went undefeated in the ACC. Why are we in the ACC? If none of this matters who we're playing against, why don't we go to the SEC? Why don't we go to the Big Ten? Folks, I think it's going to heat up big time. Big time. Realignment discussions, it's going to go through the roof. And then if you're another school, a Virginia Tech, a Louisville, a Pitt, some of those other schools in the ACC, you got to imagine that there's a domino effect. And maybe they're a little bit mad about it as well. But there might be a little bit of a domino effect. They got to find a way to get out of that grant of rights. Donald chimed in, and he kind of sees it the other way. Ohio State fan till I die. And I respect both sides of the coin. I understand. You cannot root for your rival. I get that. I understand that. I also understand that if Michigan plays Washington in the college football playoff national title game, that boosts our conference, and therefore that boosts us, if I'm talking from an Ohio State point of view here right now. I see both sides of the coin, and I know it can hurt sometimes to cheer for your rival, but in order to further the narrative towards where it should be with the Big Ten Conference, put on your maize and blue hat, go blue, do it, baby. Steven chiming in, Michigan can beat Alabama. Absolutely. Let's kind of take a look at some early lines as well for some of these other games. And I'll go here now with the playoff games, as you kind of see in here pictured on your screen. Alabama right now, Michigan -1.5, so they're going close game, and I see that coming down to one, or I think you're going to have a classic Rose Bowl. I think you're going to have a really good classic Rose Bowl. Michigan going off at -1.5, and over under. I like that 45.5. I'm not sure where I'd go on that, but here's the good news: I got time to think about it. I'm not going to put out my prediction until I absolutely have to. And then you kind of scroll down here to Texas and to Washington. Texas going off at -4. So they're talking Vegas is going Michigan and Texas for a national championship right now. 64.5. I was watching some On3 stuff with J.D. Pickell and Andy Staples today. I think they predicted around the mid-60s. Or was it the mid-50s? I thought it was the mid-60s. But yeah, you could see that one 35 to 31, even greater than that. I think the great thing about this year's playoff, I think you're going to see a lot of different. I think you're going to see you're going to see two different ball games, right? You're going to see one that's maybe more defensive. You're going to see someone that isn't as defensive as well. All right. And here's Bama barely beat Auburn. Like, you look at Alabama's schedule, and actually let me pull that up here. You guys are coming in with some good points, which I very much appreciate. I got to pull this up on full screen here. Alabama's schedule. Let's take a peek, why don't we? There it is. Tell me what that. I know, like Nick Saban was saying this post game, and he'll say what he needs to say, right? He'll say what he needs to say, but a loss to Texas. What's your best win? What's your best win right now? Tennessee, I don't think that's an overly great win. They're the number 21 team in the country. LSU's a ranked win. Ole Miss is a ranked win as well. Georgia, of course, is a big-time win, but I get that. But then look at this result against Texas A&M, 26-20. Look at that game against Arkansas, 24-21. Look at the Auburn game, 27-24. I'll just say this. They were not overly impressive. I think this whole season, I don't look at them and I see, wow, that was a convincing, great win for Alabama. I don't see that on their schedule. I just don't. Sure, they beat teams by a lot. I mean, you could probably throw in LSU maybe as the most convincing win. I'd have to go back at the film to see exactly how that game eventually turned out. So it's Alabama's schedule. It doesn't really pop out to me. That's where I'm at. It doesn't say, wow, look at that. It doesn't. Michigan versus the world. Ohio fans out in the wild now are the real ones. Got to give them credit. Exactly. They're backing you. This is not going to happen all the time, Michigan fans. It's not going to happen all the time. Dubs up. Thanks for chiming in. Guess I need to subscribe to you with UW moving to the Big Ten. Yeah, we're going to be talking a lot of Washington. I'm probably going to be hitting up my guy Roman Tomashov of Locked On Huskies and Sports Illustrated over there, but we've been DMing kind of back and forth here. So we're going to be talking probably to him. We're going to be kind of interviewing and kind of going back and forth with some of these guys in terms of these bowl games coming up. So make sure you stay tuned on the channel for that. But yeah, certainly, if you're a Washington fan, welcome to the conference. You are a member of this conference. As far as I know right now, you're a member of this league. Now that the Pac games are over, every one of those 4 West Coast schools is a Big Ten member. That's the way I see it. Our guy Don once again saying, tell me where the good refs are. A good ref is one that does not get noticed. I reffed middle school softball and basketball, if my memory serves me correct. And I knew I was doing a good job when nobody noticed I was there. I would show up. I'd make my calls, I'd do my thing, I'd crack some jokes with some of the coaches, and then I'd leave. I'd leave like George Kiliavkov at the Pac-12 championship game ceremony. Like no one ever knew I was there. Like no one ever knew I was there. Discount bulk sales. Oregon offense is better than Michigan. I won't argue with that. I will not argue with that point. Oregon has a good offense. You saw, I believe if they would have made a stop in the Pac-12 championship game, we might be talking about Oregon in the college football playoff. Bo Nix was humming there late in that game. They were humming late in that game. Rose Bowl. Can't wait for it. It is going to be a lot of fun. And Donald also chiming in here. Michigan going to be in trouble. Look, here's the deal. I'm all in on Michigan right now. I want to see them do well. Of course, this offseason, it's going to be interesting to say the least in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Could this championship, if they win it, be stripped later? Maybe. I don't know. I've tried to avoid this whole sign stealing thing from the beginning. It's just damned if you do, damned if you don't. You open your mouth, you're going to make somebody mad, right? That's just how this whole sign stealing thing has kind of gone down. It's unfortunate that's kind of the way it's gone down as well. You know, Marcus kind of brings up a good point here. 14-0 Florida State. In the past, remember when Auburn went undefeated in 2004? I'm sure our guy Trojan Blade can talk to you about that, right? A lot of USC fans out there kind of have talked about that recently. But in this era, I never thought I'd see an undefeated team that did not play in the playoff, that did not play for a championship. Florida State, I mean, they're playing Georgia, right? Georgia might have a good amount of opt-outs as well. Boy, I saw the Zoom call kind of promoting nobody wants to be in that game. That's the thing about Georgia, and that's the thing about Florida State. Nobody wants to play in that game. Nobody wants to play. Nobody wants to be there. That's kind of the thing about this modern day of college football. A lot of these top programs are putting all of their effort into getting into the playoff, and it's going to be now those top 10 teams next season with the 12-team deal. And now, like, if you don't have it, it's just such a consolation prize now. These bowl games are such a consolation prize right now that you get those looks right from these coaches when they don't make it. When they don't make it. It's tough, but that's just kind of what I've seen as well. Josh, Penn State fan, looking forward to the additions over there, and the Big Ten taking over CBS Sports. Look, it's sad the SEC on CBS is going bye-bye, but don't let SEC fans think you that is their theme song. The CBS Sports covered, I think that was a part of the CFA agreement back in the day. This was the theme song was that before the SEC. They got the SEC deal 90. I want to say 92, but I feel like that's not right. Might have been a couple of years after that. Because remember, it went first for the first few years. CBS, it was not the SEC only. It was SEC and Big East. And then a few years later, it was just an exclusive deal with the Southeastern Conference. So don't let him tell you that. Don't let him tell you that. Donald, Ohio State, Missouri, going to be an incredibly good game. I just think Ohio State's got more talent. I think the Buckeyes are talented in a lot of different positions, but I can say that now. Opt-out's going to completely change some things. I remember last bowl season when I'm kind of preparing and putting these previews out. It's really hard. It's hard to put these previews out because, there's like transfer portal Twitter accounts that you kind of keep up with. I got to find an opt-outs one. I got to find one that really talks about opt-outs. 1991, the year this Big Ten commentator was born. That's the year Don James won a national championship with the Washington Huskies as well. We'll see if the Huskies can win their first national championship since 1991. Of course, they went to the college football playoff back in 2016 under Chris Peterson. Jonathan Smith, current Michigan State head coach, was the offensive coordinator on that team. We'll see if the Huskies can find a way to get it done. But you look at Washington. This is a program. College football playoff. What are the years? It's 2023. So what is that? 2 playoffs in 7 or 8 years? I'm terrible at math, but one thing I do know, that's pretty good for Washington. That's pretty good. They're going to be a transfer portal destination, I think, for a quarterback as well. Jared, we all are. I think ESPN is the biggest problem in all of this. ESPN is the biggest problem within this whole deal right now. I think the way they slant the narrative, I think the way they put so much emphasis on the playoff, I understand it's their product. I understand, but I think that's why we need a little bit more diversity in college football, right? We need more networks at the table. And like, even if Fox gets involved in this thing as well, they're going to push that big time as well. So we just, as college football fans, there was a clip put out from the Cover 3 podcast that was great as well. It's like, don't let the playoff be the absolute number one deal. Don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. Focus on your rivals. Focus on what college football is. Don't let this be the NFL, right, where, well, we got to get in the playoffs. If we don't make the playoffs, fire the coach. Okay, if you don't make the playoffs in a 3 or 4 year period, just whatever those talking points are. Just let's not get into that. I don't want to see that's what this is eventually going to become. We got Alabama and Wisconsin next year. I kind of feel bad for my Badgers. I really hope we could be competitive in that football game, but that's going to be a tough one. 2:30 on CBS, and don't let other fans kind of also talk about, hey, enjoy Iowa Rutgers. First of all, I am going to enjoy Iowa Rutgers. Thank you. Second of all, if you know anything about this TV deal, it's going to rotate. It's going to rotate. You're not going to have West Coast games on Fox. There's going to be a TV draft kind of deal. CBS is going to get great games. NBC is going to get great games. They're going to get great games. Like, that's don't let anybody convince you of anything. Anybody that says anything to the contrary hasn't read the deal, doesn't really know what they're talking about. Jared Jones, Big Ten Head Champions Club member. If you want to be a Champions Club member, hit that join button and considering supporting this channel on a monthly basis. I doubt we will see Florida State go to the SEC, considering ESPN and that whole deal. This could be a big shift because as I was really paying attention to this thing lately, I thought Florida State and Clemson, they're going to make their way to the SEC. Okay, I was good with that. But this thing could flip. Realignment, as we know, can flip big time. Maybe this is the move that gets FSU back on the telephone with Tony Petitti. Been watching it, and of course, I am not. I am not the number one source for realignment talk. I will talk realignment, but all of you on YouTube, you know what the number one source for realignment is. Of course, I will always say it's CFB Speak around the corner. That's what I'm going to be watching here this next few days to see if Greg kind of drops some information on Florida State, possibly kind of moving over to the Big Ten. Because Miami and FSU, I think that would be a great pair. Miami, FSU, North Carolina, Notre Dame. That changes the game. That changes the game over there on the East Coast. Vince Watson, future Power 2 playoff. The committee is just preconditioning fans for the future. Or these teams are just very, very good. Right? Why can't both exist at the same time? Like, you look at the Power 2. You look at the conferences. It's just the way they're shaped out. They're big brands. The bigger brands are in the Big Ten and they're in the SEC. Like, you look at some of these other teams in other conferences, the ACC, okay, I'll give you FSU, I'll give you Clemson, Miami, although they just got Justin Scott to flip from Ohio State. Sorry, Buckeye fans. There's not a lot of recruiting powers outside of the Big Ten and the SEC. Okay, you look at Clemson, you look at FSU, those are the teams out there in the ACC. The Big 12, right? We mentioned before, they don't have a lot of recruiting powers. When it comes to the big blue blood programs that attract top talent, they're in the Big 10, they're in the SEC. You got to think the resources and the TV exposure and being the number one game. Like, that's the thing. The SEC is the number one option on ESPN and ABC. Okay, they're going to throw in Big 12 games, but they're going to promote the SEC games the most. I think Big 12 fans are going to learn that as we go along. You're going to see a lot of SEC games on the inventory of ESPN, ESPN2, and ABC as compared to Big 12 games. I just think that's the way it's going to go, and they're going to get more promotion. They're going to get a little bit more love. They're going to get a little bit more love. Penn State all the way for Josh. My question, has the rest of the country tired of hearing the SEC inferiority chant? Yeah, it's just, and I don't blame people like Greg Sankey. They got a job to do. The university presidents hire Greg Sankey. They hire Tony Petitti to do a job as well. And I don't mind that, but it's when the networks that are supposed to remain biased. But I understand they have hundreds of millions and billions of dollars invested in some of these conferences. I think that's a problem with college football. I think college football would be better if networks put their pool of money into cover college football as a whole, right? If somehow these conferences formed an alliance that says we're going to negotiate a TV contract together, so Fox isn't, so therefore you don't have a network pushing a narrative for a conference. Instead, they're looking over college football as a whole, and they can be a little bit more unbiased, but we know those days are not, they're not, the CFA ain't coming back anytime soon. Let me just put it that way. Poster chiming in, to be awesome to see Michigan lose to Washington. Yeah, that was the 1991 Rose Bowl, right? The Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies, January 1st, 1992. I got to look up the score to that game. But yeah, that was essentially the national championship game in that Rose Bowl game between the Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies. That would be the rematch. This was indeed right here. It was the 1992 Rose Bowl game. It was a 34-14 win over there for Washington over the Michigan Wolverines. You had Michigan. I thought they were undefeated. They were 10-1. I guess. But they were, you see number 4 on the poll for Michigan, number 2, Washington, of course, had to win the national championship, which is what happened as well. I thought maybe Miami might have claimed a title that year as well. I think they were pretty high in the rankings that year as well. But yeah, they haven't met on this type of stage since that type. I know they've met since then in the regular season, but since this game, they haven't met on this big of a stage since that big time Rose Bowl. That was a big one. Certainly one of the biggest Big Ten, Pac-10 Rose Bowls, I think maybe, in the history of that particular relationship. More from Josh. I hope Penn State, Auburn's Ole Miss in Atlanta. We'll see. I think Penn State has a pretty decent advantage. I think they have a pretty good advantage, I think, in this one. TJ, been calm. I've been calm, TJ, on Florida State. What's the opinion on FSU? I would have put in FSU, but I'm not going to touch too much on Florida State because it's water under the bridge, and a lot of people are getting hyped up about it. Everything's over. Oh, man, college football's ruined. You can have your opinion. I can have mine. I'm looking forward to the future. Look, I love traditional college football. I love this was the best regular season in sports, and now with an expanded playoff, we'll see if it continues to be. I think it will be. I think instead of now 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 battling it out to maybe get in, I think you're going to see 10, 11, 12, 13 as maybe those really competitive and intense types of matchups down the stretch. And I like what they're doing with the conference championship games as well. Because I've thought about, hey, maybe in 2026 we'll expand to a 16-team playoff, but I like staying with 12. It puts more emphasis on those conference title games because the top 4 seeds in the playoffs, the teams that get byes, are the top 4 conference champions. So let's say Michigan and Ohio State this year, right? What were they, number 2 and number 3? Say they stayed, or say it was like 2 and 4 or something after the first game, and they say they would have rematched in the Big Ten title game. Now you're playing for a bye. In that, now I think that puts a little bit more emphasis. You want to get that bye so you don't have to go on campus. You don't have to play maybe a team that's playing really good late in the season. They got hot at the end of the year. Kind of thing. So, yeah, I think these conference championship games are going to have a little bit more juice behind them as well. TJ also talking about that LSU offense. And, yeah, as a Badger fan, I certainly got my eye on it. We'll see, you look at Neighbors, you look at Jalen Daniels. I want to see what happens with these opt-outs. As a Badger fan, I'm kind of hoping and praying that – remember opt-outs got the worst of – this LSU versus the Big Ten last year in the bowl game. Remember when Aiden O'Connell, Payne Durham, Charlie Jones, everybody opted out for Purdue, and that was a drubbing from the start. That was never going to be close. LSU was always going to get it done as well. Josh, yes, I remember you telling me this before, but he was at the Big Ten title game last night, which Michigan alumni fans thought they would get Florida State. Alabama will certainly be a tough battle for the Michigan Wolverines. If you want to kind of comment below, I'm curious what the crowd split kind of was in that game, because obviously Michigan was favored big time in that game. Iowa fans do travel well, right? I was on Media Row for the Big Ten women's basketball tournament this past year. Of course, Caitlin Clark doing some great things. And Iowa fans, man, that building, Iowa played Ohio State in the tournament final, and Iowa fans, they were rocking. They were filling the entire Target Center. They were awesome as well. We got a USC meetup in the chat. Two of my favorite Trojans, Tim Prangley and the Trojan Blade, coming in. And USC, as long as I will cater to the Trojans in the chat right now as the Big Ten member. Will Howard, possibly being a transfer quarterback. This is my opinion. If I'm a transfer quarterback, I'm looking at you, Lincoln Riley. You've got the track record, right? This is a great transfer class for quarterbacks. Lincoln Riley, technically, I know. Obviously, you got to go out and visit. So you got to talk to these people on their turf, so to speak. But if I'm Lincoln Riley, I'm sitting back and saying, "You call me, man. I'm Lincoln Riley. I coach Baker Mayfield. I coach Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Caleb Williams." The track record speaks for itself. If I'm a transfer quarterback, why would you not? Like with the track record of Lincoln Riley and playing football for a program, a blue blood like USC, and now you're playing in the Big Ten on a big stage, like you're not playing Pac-12 after dark anymore. Like, with all due respect, rest in peace. The track record proves for itself. Wow. Let me try that again. The track record speaks for itself in terms of transfer quarterbacks going to USC. All right, let's get to some more. Man, next year's going to be different. Next year is going to be different. Trojan Blade chiming in. Yeah, Colorado. I can kind of talk about that here just a little bit. They're going down to the Big 12. I don't know. I think that Deion Sanders is kind of rubbing the people the wrong way right now. This may have worked at a place like Jackson State, right, where you can come in and essentially do anything you want, right, at the HBCU level. And he did a lot for that university down in Jackson, Mississippi, and for HBCUs in general. But, man, when you step up to the Power 5, and I have respect for Colorado for making that decision, but when you step up and you're demoting Sean Lewis in the middle of the season, and Tim Brewster, right? We don't like him here in Minnesota. Tim Brewster, of all people, leaves your program for another, I think at the University of Charlotte? Yeah, Bruin Biff, right? Biff Poggi and Tim Brewster are going to kind of be teaming up there as well. So, yeah, I don't know. Colorado's not doing well in recruiting. You're seeing some decommitments. After Shador and Travis Hunter kind of step up to the next level, what's going to be your commitment? I don't know. I just my personal opinion, I don't think it's going to work. Going to the Big 12, going to take a step down. We'll see. A little bit behind on the chat. Just a reminder, if you want to make sure your chat is for sure read, attach a donation to it by hitting the $sign and making your chat a super chat as well. So just if you want to make sure that your chat is indeed read tonight, that would be the way to guarantee that you get your chat or question here on the show this evening. Nick Tunes, FSU at least is in a position to compete every year now. Mike Norvell has it going on there, and the expanded playoff guarantees the teams will get a fair shot. I understand that. Tell that to them right now. Tell that to those kids. Tell that to that defense that stood up in hockey terms, like we talk about in Minnesota, standing on your head, right? Where you just do fantastic work on defense, right? They did it against Florida and they did it against Louisville. Like, I'm not saying those are the most prolific offenses in the country, but Florida State, you deserve a little bit of credit. They deserve some credit. That defense deserves a little bit of credit, but there's a lot of people around college football. There's a lot of people around the country that all they look at is offense, right? And you see a lot of people that kind of smirk and put their nose down on a team like Iowa. That's fine. That's cool. You can do whatever you want. You can have whatever opinion you want, but football comes in many different flavors. Football comes in many different forms. I've heard many people talk about this. Some people like Neapolitan ice cream. Some people like chocolate ice cream. Some people like vanilla ice cream. There's different flavors of ice cream. I like something. Just because I like something doesn't mean that you have to say that's terrible, right? It's just everybody has their own taste buds as well. Here's Jeff chiming in. Will Hudson Card transfer? That's a big question right now. I'm getting kind of back on the Big Ten train tracks. See what I did there? You lost TJ Sheffield. You lost Abdur Rahman Yassim. You lost Deion Burks. You lost your entire receiver room essentially already, and the transfer portal is going to heat up big time on Monday, on December 4th, when this thing actually opens. I'd watch out for Card. I think he could transfer as a grad transfer, if I'm not mistaken. I think this next year is slated to be his last year of eligibility. I think a lot of people now can grad transfer because of the COVID year as well. Sometimes a grad transfer with a couple of years left on their eligibility. But yeah, I think Hudson Card, that's something to keep an eye out for Purdue. Ryan Walters got to find a way to keep him around. Maybe their NIL collective can pony up some bucks as well to possibly make that happen. TJ been calm, can't sleep on the Huskies. Not only Roma Dunze, a healthy Jalen McMillan, right? He went off, 9 catches, 160, something like that in the Pac-12 title game against the Oregon Ducks. Okay, a healthy Jalen McMillan makes this Washington offense that much more explosive. Jalen McMillan, Roma Dunze, Jalen Polk, Giles Jackson, Jeremy Bernard, the former Michigan State Spartan. Like, Jeremy Bernard could be starting for a lot of college football teams, but he's kind of buried. I know he's kind of more involved in special teams, but he's kind of buried on this Washington depth chart right now. And yeah, it's it's crazy to see where exactly he's at. I think he's a talented kid. But yeah, their wide receiver room is ridiculous. Beginning of the year, I said Ohio State, best receiver room in the country. Can I change my mind? I think it's Washington. Even though Ohio State probably has the most talented receiver in the country, best NFL prospect in Marvin Harrison Jr., Washington has some great, fantastic wide receivers that can get it done. I think that's what makes them so dangerous, is not just having a Rome and a Jalen, but also having the Jalen Polks of the world. He's a guy to really keep an eye on for Texas. I think that's going to give Texas a lot of problems. Okay, if you're just joining us, I said this earlier, Texas's pass defense 95th in all of college football and all of FBS. They could have some matchup nightmares. Trojan Blade, we've been talking about this offline. Let's talk about it online. Thoughts on Will Howard possibly going to SC? I think they can do better. That's what I think. I'm not saying Will Howard could transfer into USC and he could throw for 3,530 scores and he could be really good. And Will Howard is good. I heard some rumblings about Nebraska possibly as well with Will Howard. But I just think they can do better. That's just where I'm at right now. Cam Ward, I know, has been possibly thrown out there as well. But I think they can do a little bit better. That's just where I'm at right now. Because I think they should have number one. If I'm a quarterback, I'm going to USC. They should be numero uno. So that's at least what I think. But you throw Will Howard in the USC system, he's going to have his best season as a college quarterback. No question. All due respect to my guy, Chris Kleiman, former North Dakota State head football coach when I was in Fargo. All due respect to him, they're going to open it up at USC, right? Zachariah Branch. If I'm a quarterback, I want to throw to that guy. Number one, right? I want to throw to a guy, Zachariah Branch. Man, was he electric at times this season, a freshman this season. He's going to be a big performer in the future. That's what I'll say about the USC situation. Best national game option, this coming from a Washington fan, wouldn't expect anything less. Michigan versus Washington. That's the matchup, obviously, that I would like to see. I'd like to see. An all Big Ten future. I know one of them's future. But we'll just do this for now for you Pac fans. Big Ten championship game between Michigan and Washington, and ESPN is forced to broadcast it and talk about it. But you know what the narrative's going to be? If there's no SEC team, and maybe even if there is an SEC team, they're going to be talking about this Michigan sign stealing situation. And folks that deserve no attention and none of my attention at all, but folks like Stephen A. Smith are going to come on and say Paul Feinbaum are going to come in and say it's a fraudulent game, it's a fraudulent championship, and you can have whatever opinion you want, but to say something like that, I just don't think it's accurate. TJ been calm. Defense on Washington plays good enough to win. They played pretty good. They bucked up. They did pretty darn good against Oregon. I thought they played. Now, I haven't watched every single Washington game this season, so maybe you Washington USC fans, maybe some of the Pac fans in the chat can kind of help me out here. But that, to me, was the best defensive game that I've seen Washington play all season. They flowed to the football. They were good in the front seven. Oregon had a really tough time running the football on them. I thought that was one of the best. And then they did good in coverage against some of those really good Oregon wide receivers. They did enough in terms of pressure. This is a Washington defense. I was a little bit hard on them, I'll admit. I was kind of wrong about them in my Pac-12 championship preview. But this is a defense that can maybe do some things. I got to look more at Texas and who's kind of got the better defense right now. But it could be Washington. It could be. Great show tonight. Very appreciate everybody for chiming in here this evening as we get ready here on the channel to really start to break down the college football playoff coming up and some of these Big Ten bowl games. I'm going to try, there's a lot of games, right? I'm going to try to get to USC Louisville. I'm going to try to talk about that. I'm going to try to talk about UCLA and I forgot who they're playing. It's in the LA Bowl, right? They got to travel from Westwood to Inglewood, right? Nice short drive there for the Bruin fans. And then Washington, of course, in the playoff. We're going to be talking about that. But there's a lot of bowl games to cover. Essentially, I can see the next month. I can kind of see it in the crystal ball. We're going to be doing a lot of bowl previews, talking about these upcoming bowl games, as well as transfer stuff. That's gonna, and the early signing day is thrown in there as well in December. That's kind of what December is looking like on the channel as well. Josh chiming in. Josh, you got some good comments. Josh might be the MVP of the chat here tonight. Let's see if he can be dethroned. Realignment, NIL, and transfer portal going to balance out college rosters. I think it has already. Like you look at Michael Penix, you look at Bo Nix, not saying Washington and Oregon wouldn't have been as good without the transfer portal, but it certainly helped. Right? Here's the thing about if you're not Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, somebody like that really at the top of the sport, and you want to get to the top of the sport, get a really good NIL collective, have some very friendly donors that invest a lot of money into the product, because now you can honestly say, you give me money, if I get 10, 20, $30 million every year, we can go out and get one of the top transfer quarterbacks. We can go out and get some playmakers. We can make our defense really good. We can get that player or two or three or four to really put us over the top and be in that playoff conversation and national championship conversation. That's where NIL, you need a good collective. And then I think you need a coach that's fairly adaptive and knows how to work the game and work the system. You need a coach that knows, I can't Dion this thing and bring in 70 transfers. But I can't be Dabo and be so stingy on the transfer portal, and I can't rely on just recruiting. You need to be somewhere in the middle. NIL collective also goes with recruiting as well. So you need, things are different. You need a guy as your head coach and as your athletic director, really, to promote your NIL collective. That's why at Iowa, having Beth Getz instead of Gary Barta is such a big deal. Gary Barta was pushing back on NIL, some Title IX concerns, I believe as well, would not vocally endorse the Swarm Collective, which is the collective over there in Iowa City. Beth Getz come in, boom, right away. They're on the website. They're exactly right where they need to be in terms of the NIL game. That's what you need. That's what you need to have. That's the type of game. That's the type of people that you all need to have. And Josh kind of answering my question from before, 60-40 split. Yeah, Iowa fans travel pretty well. And it's not too far of a drive from the lost my train of thought. Iowa City to Indianapolis. Not too far of a drive there. Nick Tunes, if I'm a transfer, looking at FSU. Hey, look at Keon Coleman, former Michigan State Spartan, ended up transferring over to Florida State as well. Yeah, that can be that can be. Hold on, we got to take a timeout here. We got to take a timeout. Is this real? Looking forward to the avocados from Mexico Cure Bowl. Wow, that is a sentence and a half. Avocados from Mexico. Oh, that's going to be a good one. Oh, that's fun. That's fun as well. Duke's Mayo Bowl. Got to check in on that one. Who's playing in the Duke's Mayo Bowl? I got to look forward to that one. You know, of course, I don't think it's the Big Ten this year. The Big Ten, yeah, because the Big Ten alternates between the Las Vegas Bowl and the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Last year, of course, Maryland, Mike Loxley got dumped on with the big jar of mayo. This year, Northwestern is playing in the Las Vegas Bowl. So we're not, Big Ten is not represented this year in the Duke's Mayo Bowl as well. Anna chiming in, like to see Michigan versus Washington in the College Football Playoff National Championship. You and me both. You and me both. Nebraska. I think that's one thing that we can talk about here on this program. They need a transfer. Matt Rule said it in a press conference recently, $1.5 million to $2 million to get a big-time transfer quarterback. I understand NIL is a big part of the game. It's not the only part of the game. If I'm Will Howard, right, there's been Will Howard, Nebraska rumblings out there. If I'm Will Howard, or if I'm any transfer quarterback, I know Cam Ward has been mentioned because Cam Ward was in the first transfer recruitment from Incarnate Word for the Huskers. NIL is a part of this game. Nebraska, it's kind of one of those deals where you're kind of shying away from it based on what happened on the offensive side of the football this year for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. And was it Iowa? No. Did they have a lot of injuries? Yes. You get a good quarterback in there. Can that change things? Absolutely. And then you pair that with Tony White's defense. That could maybe be a combination where some good things could happen. Dubs up. If USC is your number one transfer quarterback, how about Washington? Well, I'll tell you this. Let me answer the question in this form. Dubs up. If USC is number one, two other Big Ten programs are probably number 2 and number 3, Oregon and Washington. Those are going to be top transfer destinations. Look what Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb did with Michael Penix. He was good in 2020 at Indiana, but they took him to a completely different level as he was not one of the best quarterbacks in the country in 2020. He was good, but he wasn't that good. Right? Mac Jones, right? Of course, Alabama. They were running the show down south there in 2020 with that offense. Oregon, right? Look what's happened over there before with Kenny Dillingham, now with Will Stein, I believe is the name of their offensive coordinator over there with Dan Lanning as the head coach. Look what happened with Bo Nix, right? Bo Nix and Michael Penix are great examples. You know, maybe Michael Penix was a little bit better in his respective conference at Indiana than Bo Nix was at Auburn. But you saw how you can go from maybe middle of the road to really shoot up the board as one of the best in the country, one of the best in all of college football. Oregon and Washington. You look at that. This is gonna be hard to find the tweet, but there's a tweet out there by I think On3 that says the top 10 destinations for transfer quarterbacks, and I wouldn't be surprised if USC, Oregon, and Washington get the top 3. That would not surprise me at all. There's a graphic, but it's not the On3 one that I'm looking for. I might use it just if I can't end up finding another one. But yeah, if you're a transfer quarterback, Oregon, Washington, USC, what they've proven over the last year or so, I think is something that needs to be talked about as well. So I can't find it. I'm just going to pull up this one right here because I can't find the other graphic. But this is from another account over there on Twitter. In terms of top transfer quarterbacks, they've got Tyler Van Dyke, Grayson McCall. I saw that he took a visit to North Carolina State. As well. You got Will Howard in there. DJU. I've heard DJU to Oregon, possibly. Of course, his younger brother Mateo plays over there in Eugene, Oregon. Riley Leonard has been rumored to Notre Dame, maybe Texas A&M, right, with his old coach. Will Rogers, I floated out on a live show last week. Will Rogers, he lit it up. He lit it up at Mississippi State under Mike Leach. Why would Will Rogers not be a candidate at USC with 1 year left of eligibility? Cam Ward. How about Max Brosmer, University of New Hampshire? He got offered by Minnesota. There's been a lot of steam. Max Brosmer to Minnesota. So we'll see if the Golden Gophers can find a way to get it, because they need, of course, with Asen Kaliak-Manis going in the transfer portal from Minnesota as well. You look at, Braylon Trice getting healthier. I saw him get more involved as well in that game. Washington, that defense is getting healthier and healthier and healthier as this thing really goes along. Michigan versus the world. Tomorrow's going to be crazy. It's going to be insane. It was already insane. Tomorrow is going to be even crazier with the portal really heating up. I think you're going to start to see some commitments, right? Because you could commit but not necessarily sign, right? Max Johnson, the Texas A&M transfer, committed to North Carolina. So, it's going to get really crazy. I said this before on a show. I think you're going to start to see some of these quarterbacks make a move, or some of these teams make moves on quarterbacks, I should say. And once Oregon gets their QB, USC maybe gets their QB, Washington gets their QB, then I think the dominoes are going to kind of fall from there. That's where the dominoes really fall. Because once those big schools get their quarterbacks, then I think you're going to really start to see them, fill some other portions of their team as well. I want to bring up this, and I know we got some USC fans in the chat here tonight, but I haven't heard, there's no intel on this at all, but I do want to bring up Will Rogers as well. These were his stats. When you look at 2021, 4,800 yards, 36 touchdowns in that air raid system under Mike Leach. 2022, almost 4,000 yards, 35 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns. Like, these are stats that you maybe would want to see for a USC quarterback. Imagine what he can do in a USC offense. Of course, injuries and other things kind of held him back, and the system maybe not what he wanted here this year in 2023. But why not Will Rogers? I think someone's going to get a really good quarterback in Will Rogers. I'm not sure if he's going to get out of the SEC from early returns that I kind of heard and have been hearing as it pertains to Will Rogers, but we'll see. We'll see. Our guy John jumping in here. I always love John's comments. They're always witty and entertaining. Appreciate you with that as well. And go Blue, big Michigan fan. I'm here today. Ohio State. Let's go back to the Trojan Blade for a question here. Is Ohio State going to take a transfer quarterback? Be careful what you wish for, Buckeyes. It's not as bad as you think. It's not as bad as you think. Is Kyle McCord, Justin Fields? No. Is he C.J. Stroud? No. Been saying that all year. Okay, you're putting in a first-year quarterback. You're going to have some bumps in the road. He made some gutsy plays. You got to give Kyle McCord, he was 30 to 35 yards away from knocking off Michigan. Michigan got pressure on a play, and he had to make a throw, and it got picked off. But he was leading them down the field, gutsy, leading them back when the crowd got into it, and Michigan went on that 10-0 run after the Zach Zinter injury. All the credit in the world for Kyle McCord to will this team and keep on driving them down the field. But you got to also address the reality in the room and say, yeah, a good amount of throws were inaccurate. Not only in this game, but throughout the season as well. In my opinion, you don't go for a transfer. I think, because if NIL is a big part of this, Kyle McCord's not going anywhere. I would spend, because you're going to lose Marvin Harrison Jr., I think you're going to lose Emeka Ibuka. You got to find a way, NIL-wise, to keep your skill players up at Ohio State. And they've got the backing. We know they've got the boosters. We know they got the people to figure it out. I think Kyle McCord's going to improve. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten as we sit right now. We'll see what happens at Oregon, Washington, USC. But you look at Drew Aller, you look at Kyle McCord right now is two of the better returning quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Next season, I know there's going to be temptation, but I look at the quarterbacks in the portal right now, and I'm not so quick to really jump out unless they feel they can turn Dante Moore into a superstar at Ohio State. Been hearing Oregon and Michigan State for Dante Moore. Unless they think that they can do that, one, they can pull it off to bring him into Columbus, and two, he can be better than Kyle McCord. I just don't foresee that. I don't foresee that happening. If they would bring somebody in, it would be someone fairly experienced. Gerald McKinley chiming in here with a good point as well. If JJ leaves, Joel Klatt brought up on the broadcast, he might not leave. Crazy. It's a good year for quarterbacks, I think, coming out in the NFL draft. If he waits, he could maybe be number one, number two type of quarterback next season. I get that point, but I think he's still a first-round talent, a second-round talent. I think he can get paid a lot of money and make more in the NFL than he can do NIL. But I think we've seen J.J. McCarthy really loves Michigan. I think the big thing to really watch out for is if Jim Harbaugh leaves, does he leave? Even though I think Sharon Moore will get promoted if, let's be honest, when that happens. I think it's a when more than an if right now as it pertains to Jim Harbaugh next season. To our guy Tim Prangley, Trojan Conquest. Riley, greater than Grubb, greater than Stein. I can get down with that order. I can get down with the order. I would say this about this. I think the gap between Riley, if we're going with what Tim is saying here, 1, 2, and 3, I think the gap between Riley and Grubb is bigger than the gap between Grubb and Stein. I think those are pretty close, but I think without a doubt, Lincoln Riley and his track record of quarterbacks speaks for itself. And you also got to factor in the skill position, right? I think USC needs to do a little bit more in the trenches. I think they started some things with Bear Robinson in the on the defense, and they're going to get things figured out. D'Anton Lynn, good job. Good job, USC. You got a good one, a young one, but a good one. You got to know because of the youth, he might be a head coach. If things go really well for you Trojans, he might be a head coach in a couple of years. So be prepared possibly for that conversation coming down the pike. But boy, USC, I don't know if UCLA didn't, boy, if they weren't collapsing to begin with, USC could have put the nail in the coffin. We got a long way to go this offseason. Chip Kelly's been fairly good in the transfer portal, but losing Dante Moore, your future, losing D'Anton Lynn, the coordinator of your better unit, right? A great UCLA defense this season. I'm a little worried about them as they join the Big Ten. A little bit worried about the Bruins. I thought after I watched them against USC, I'm like, okay, that's all right. Looking all right. We'll see. And the TJ Harden, I think, was a running back that was pretty good. That looked really good. I think he was out of the LA area, high school-wise. But now it doesn't look good. You know, are they going to try it out Ethan Garbers or Colin Schlee next year at quarterback? They got J. Michael Sturdivant, the transfer from Cal. I don't know if he had the season that Bruin fans were expecting. They lose Logan Loya at wide receiver as well. Of course, Liatu Latu, right? They're a great defensive player as well. There's going to be a lot of changes for the Bruins over at UCLA. And I can take a look at their schedule right now. It doesn't look great. I feel like I looked at this before, their schedule. And the thing is, we can look at schedules right now until we're blue in the face. But until we're baby blue and gold in the face, in the case of the UCLA Bruins, so let's pull up their schedule right now. This is kind of where it's at. Let's kind of zoom in here. Let's see. All right, there we go. Indiana's their first conference game. Hey, well, who knows where Kurt Signetti could have his team? He's got the fan base pumped up, saying Purdue sucks, Ohio State and Michigan sucks. So we'll see where that one's going at. But UCLA, I just want to make sure. Yeah, 2024 schedule. All right. At LSU. They got to play at LSU out of conference. That's tough. I thought LSU played. Didn't they play USC out of conference as well? Did this schedule change? When was the schedule? All right, I might look at a different schedule. Let me bring up another one. I just want to make sure I got this right. I always go to FBS Schedules as my main place to get updated schedules. They do a great job over there at that website with the latest scheduling changes over there. So if I go to Pac-12 and I go to UCLA, maybe I'll be able to bring up the accurate schedule for 2024. Yeah, I'll be damned. It is at LSU. I guess I didn't know. Does LSU play USC and UCLA? They do. They play the Trojans and the Bruins. That's crazy. That's insane. Wow. I did not know that. But anyway, going back to UCLA's schedule, I need to trust you would think I would trust the university webpage at UCLA, but it just made me kind of double check myself a little bit there. So let's kind of go back to UCLA's schedule. Why don't we? There it is. I've got, how ironic, I've got the Trojan Blades comment covering up the date for the Big Ten championship game on UCLA's schedule. So I'm kind of funny there. All right, so you look at them. Oregon, tough. Penn State, not happening. Minnesota, we'll see. Minnesota, they were able to keep Darius Taylor and Cody Lindenberg. If they can nail a transfer quarterback, we'll see what happens with the Gophers. Rutgers is going to have a good defense. They've got Powell, their great linebacker, kind of coming back. We'll see what Nebraska gets. Like, you kind of look up and down the schedule. It's going to be tough. And look what UCLA did, losing to Cal. Who else? They lost to what? Arizona State, I think, if my memory serves me correct. They lose to Arizona. Arizona was a decent team, though, so I shouldn't throw them into that mix. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough. Like, you look at Nebraska, Iowa, Washington, USC towards the end of the season. That's not easy. That's not easy for the UCLA Bruins. So we'll see. Maybe things can get fairly propped up. Maybe we can figure it all out for UCLA, but it certainly doesn't look the most inviting right now for the Bruins. Big Ten TED Champions Club member Jared Jones predicting USC Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship next year. I look at that. I'm going to look at the flag behind me, and then I'm going to look at and I'm going to imagine what's going on with these Western schools. I think Oregon's going to be in the mix. I think they're going to get a transfer quarterback. They recruit really well. I would say the Ducks. Not saying that they're going to make it or be in it on the last weekend, but I think they might be in the mix. Washington might be there as well. But in terms of Big Ten teams, Michigan, you got to think is going to take a step down, right? If McCarthy and Corum and Edwards and all these guys aren't back next year, you got to think maybe things take a little bit of a dip at the University of Michigan. Let's see who else could contend. Man, it's so early in the. I look at Penn State. Drew Aller's back. Nick Singleton's back. Katron Allen's back. Abdul Carter, Danny Dennis Sutton on the defensive side of the football. I've said it many times. Penn State is the team of 2024. And then you bring in Andy Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator from Kansas, making his way to Penn State, much more dynamic, much more creative in his play design. That's a great hire as the new offensive coordinator at Penn State. Mike Yurcich might have gotten a little bit stagnant. I think Kotelnicki is going to open up that Penn State offense. They have to get some big-time transfers in the portal. I don't think things went the way they wanted it to for Dante Cephas. I think they thought he was that guy, the transfer from Kent State coming in. He didn't really pan out. Didn't pan out. Yeah, SC opens in Vegas. Wow. So LSU plays 11 because they play 8 conference games. That's right. So then they have 2 against lesser opponents. I always forget about that. Yeah, Hamasiro also pointing out, one of our resident Buckeye fans, Penn State loses quite a bit. They lose quite a bit. That's the thing. They need what Penn State needs to do. Wide receiver and secondary have got to be 2 big focuses. Abdul Carter's great. Danny Dennis Sutton will be great. I think Zane Durant comes back on that defensive line as well. But the secondary, it's been so good the last few years. Remember Joey Porter Jr. and Jair Brown, they left. And then this year, Kalen King, Daquan Hardy, and Johnny Dixon, right? Johnny Dixon out there. All those guys are going to be gone, right? The secondary, I think, could be a pretty big deal. They've got players on offense, but I think Penn State's going to be in the mix. They don't have to play Michigan next year. They get the Buckeyes at home. I think Penn State's going to be in the mix. I think it's going to be very competitive, because you've got Ohio State and Michigan that are going to be losing a lot of guys. What's going to happen with these West Coast teams? We don't know what the dynamic is going to be. Are they come in? Are they going to sling it around, or are they going to receive some pushback from some of these Big Ten defenses? Marcus Aurelius Maximus, USC? Nope. Penn State, Oregon, Washington, Ohio State, Michigan. Like, look at those teams. If Oregon and Washington nail their transfer, or if they, let's just say, nail the quarterback position, because, hey, maybe Thompson could still be in the mix at Oregon. He's not going to get an audition because it sounds like Bo Nix is playing in the bowl game, whatever. Yeah, that's the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. Boy, this could be one of the most competitive seasons of Big Ten football that we've ever seen. And Jared Jones saying, I think, what a lot of people in Big Ten country have in their brain, but they don't want to say it. We know what USC is when they're on. Like, you can't deny that. You can't deny what the Trojans are. The Trojans, when things are going well, things are going really well. Look at Pete Carroll. I'm not saying we're getting Pete Carroll USC. The Big Ten, I'm sure we're hoping we get Pete Carroll USC, but it's certainly not guaranteed. Certainly not guaranteed. But even if we get 10-win USC on average, maybe you go to 9 some years, maybe you go to 11 some years. That's what Tony Petitti, well, it was Kevin Warren actually that made the move at the time. But that's what I think we want. We want USC to be a power player. We want Oregon to be a power player. So your top 5 are Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, USC, and Oregon. We want the Trojans and the Ducks to be perennial top 10 teams. We want Washington to be a perennial top 20 to top 15 type of program, and maybe a perennial top 10 type of college football team where you're getting a lot of these teams into the college football playoff, the 12-team playoff every single year. That's what, like, coming from my point of view that covers the conference as a whole, we need UCLA. They might go up and down, right? Historically, of course, they're not a great program. Oregon, Washington, USC, that's where the Big Ten, I think, is really going to make their money. And that's where they're really going to strengthen themselves as a conference on a consistent basis. You can see UCLA come up every now and then, right? Being in LA, playing at the Rose Bowl in the Big Ten, all that, you kind of jam it together. That's got to go for something. Maybe for the Bruins. We'll see if this is like Chip Kelly's going to have a prove-it year if he's still the coach in 1 year in the Big Ten. USC plays a really difficult schedule next season. LSU, Notre Dame, the Crosstown Bruins, Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Washington all next year for the USC Trojans. It's insane. Pete Carroll had a Nick Saban vibe here, according to Michigan Against the World. They were unstoppable. I remember, I grew up, that was the era of college football that I grew up with, was Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, before that Carson Palmer. And then eventually on to guys like, what was that, John David Booty came after that, Matt Barkley. At one point, I kind of knew the order of USC quarterbacks. It's kind of faded, but I'm sure I'll get to that point. I'm sure I'll remember them here fairly soon now that they're a member of this conference. But they were recruiting great. They could recruit anybody at quarterback. They could recruit anybody at a skill position. Defense was fantastic. There was an era where Pete Carroll, if they were a top 100 player in the state of California, they were begging to come to USC. Then they kind of went down. Oregon kind of slid in at that point under Chip Kelly and picked it up a little bit, right, in terms of the success and maybe in terms of some of the recruiting as well. But USC has always been a power. USC will continue, you got to think, to be a power out west. And now that they're a member of the Big Ten, being some of these big national games on CBS and NBC, that's going to increase their profile as compared to maybe where they were television-wise in the Pac-12 conference. And speaking of scheduling, Dubs Up, kind of reading my mind, one thing I appreciate about the Big Ten that our scheduling already looks way better. The Pac was horrible at how it schedules games. I cannot speak to how the Pac scheduled games, but I can speak to how the Big Ten will schedule games in the future. Look, the Fox, here's the thing about Big Noon, and a lot of people have their opinion about Big Noon. But I think here's where the flexibility comes into play, is that now you have Big Noon is going to host your Michigans, your Ohio States, and your Penn States. Okay, it's been confirmed, I believe, from Kerry Kenny from the conference that the West Coast schools are not going to host Big Noon kickoff for 9 a.m. local time kickoffs, which is a great move because now and that's why it's important for these West Coast teams to be really good so CBS and NBC can get their value of the deal. Because if you get a USC team that's ranked 6th in the country and they're hosting 3rd-ranked Michigan, that game's going to be on CBS or it's going to be on NBC. That's, I think, where the value in the deal, and of course CBS and NBC are going to get some other big games as well. Like I said at the top, don't listen to your SEC friend. Don't listen to your SEC fan that says, all of a sudden, like, we're going to get Iowa and Rutgers on CBS. No, that's not how it's going to work. It's going to rotate. It's going to be a draft but that's why it's important for the Big Ten to have so much depth. That's why it's important for Wisconsin to be good. That's why it's important for Nebraska to be good. The teams with a backing, the teams with good fan bases and a following, it's important for them to be good. We can't have Nebraska going 5-7 and 4 and 8 and 3 and 9. Those days have to be done in Lincoln. They gotta carry their end of the bargain, so to speak. They have the biggest, probably the most passionate fan base in all of college football. Let's get them good, Matt Rule, and that could happen possibly next season. Michigan versus the world. They were stacking 5 stars. The Georgia before Georgia, right? The Georgia before Georgia, right? They could have anybody they wanted. Talking about Mark Sanchez as well in the chat. He left with school, from what I remember, he left school 1 year too early. If I kind of remember how that all went down. 1 year too early. Feli Peltier chiming in, and I wanted this too. Or we've had so many lasts this year in college football. I wanted one last Big Ten Pac-12 Rose Bowl, but Georgia had to mess it all up. They messed it all up, man. They had a chance. Georgia was going to be 1. Michigan and Washington would be 2 and 3. And then number 4 would be Florida State or Texas. In this scenario, they probably would have taken Texas, right, if Georgia would have beaten Alabama. But you know what? We're going to have something better. We're going to have a current Big Ten versus future Big Ten national championship in Houston, Texas. It's going to be better. But I understand what you're saying. I wanted that as well. I tweeted that multiple times. Josh chiming in. Wisconsin and Nebraska need to improve dramatically. Remember, it's year 1 of their coaches installing the system. But yes, they need to get better. And I think they need to take a big jump. Wisconsin went 7-5 in year 1. They improved by a game. As a Badger fan, I know, trust me, it did not seem like it. But they're going to get better. Those teams are recruiting top 25 in the country. These Matt Rule and Luke Fickell have proven their track record is they are good developmental head coaches. They know how to improve these players over time. Give them some time. Give them some years. They're going to get there. I can't wait for this playoff. I can't wait for bowl season, right? It's I'm going to be chalking up how many times the Big Ten defeats, if they do defeat. Man, I hope they do. I hope they win this battle against the SEC so we can start to change the narrative. We've got some breaking news, folks, and this is a big one. And this is a big one for you, for some Big Ten fans. We've got transfer news coming in hot across the wire here, and I'm going to bring it up here according to Ryan Burns, a great reporter covering the Gophers. Max Brosmer, a 4-star transfer recruit from New Hampshire, has committed to the University of Minnesota. Folks, this is a big one. Max Brosmer is a good one. Okay, he was right now ranked as one of the top 10 transfer quarterbacks on the market, and he is committed to Minnesota. He was a Walter Payton Award finalist for the Player of the Year at the FCS level of college football. This is a big one. You've got Darius Taylor in the backfield for the Golden Gophers, and now you got Max Brosmer at quarterback. This is a year where PJ Fleck has to convince the fans, and he has to convince people in Minneapolis. Just that way, down the highway. He's got to convince people that things are going to turn around. Darius Taylor is back. Cody Lindenberg is back. Daniel Jackson is back. And now they get Max Brosmer at quarterback. Good for you, Dinkytown athletes. The NIL collective of the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Michigan versus the world knows it. Because that's PJ Fleck. Maybe he's smarter than all of us. Maybe we need to give him a little bit more credit. He said, talking about Darius Taylor, we need NIL contributions to keep some of these players here. Max Brosmer committed to Minnesota. That is a big get with Daniel Jackson coming with. This is a Gopher team that might make a pretty decent improvement. I know the schedule is going to get a lot tougher for Minnesota, but the first thing the Gophers needed to do is to make an improvement and an upgrade over Ethan Kaliakmanis at the quarterback position. And I believe this move with Max Brosmer becoming the new quarterback at Minnesota, that is a move in the right direction for the Golden Gophers. I'm going to bring up, as long as we're kind of talking about it, I'm going to bring up Max Brosmer's stats here to kind of really tell the story about maybe what kind of quarterback and what kind of guy he is right now. So let's pull up Max Brosmer's stats here. Passing, you look at these last 2 years. I'll try to use my highlighted here. Okay, here we go. Over 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And then the next year, this year, 35 touchdowns, 29 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions as well. Efficient passer. There you see the completion rate for Max Brosmer. This is a pretty big get for them. Usually when you see someone involved, visits, offers fairly early in the process, you know that these two are on the same page. It looked like Minnesota and Brosmer were on the same page from the very start. If Minnesota can land a top 10 transfer quarterback in this class, that is a huge get, because I think Minnesota has some players around. Like I mentioned, Darius Taylor, young running back, is really, really good. Yeah, it's if they can. Daniel Jackson coming up as well. Looks like the Trojan Blade has watched more Max Brosmer film than I have, talking about throwing a beautiful deep ball. I'll have to go back and kind of look at some of this film. But, boy, Daniel Jackson in there at wide receiver. Let's see if Le'Meke Brockington can take a step forward. Elijah Spencer comes back at wide receiver. Maybe this thing's going to click. Maybe Minnesota is the team to really watch out for next season in 2024. I'm trying to pull up the quarterback transfer rankings according to On3, but kind of having a little bit of trouble doing that right now. Whatever. Well, no, it'd be top here. Let's see if I can find where he kind of sits within the quarterback room in terms of the top transfers out there. And I'll kind of pull it up here. This is On3, so other services might look at it a little bit differently. But starting at number 1, they've got Cam Ward, Riley Leonard, Will Howard are sitting there at number 3, right? Yeah, I would generally agree with this. Yeah, you have Leonard and Ward right there. Uyunglele, I think that could be pretty close with Will Howard over there. I think they've got pretty comparable statistics. Will Rogers, I'd watch out for Will Rogers. He had a down year, but I think he could be one of the top transfers. But there you see Max Brosmer sitting up there at number 8, above guys like Max Johnson, Tyler Shaw. Yeah, you look at some of these other guys. This is a pretty big pickup for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, breaking it live here on the channel. So big props to PJ Fleck. I saw it early, and I'm like, oh, if he can close the deal on that, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Good for you, Minnesota. Now you've got that's a lot of things with these teams and their transfers. Get that quarterback, and now let's fill in the rest. Minnesota fairly early in the process, right? They're probably going to sign on the dotted line, so to speak, tomorrow. But fairly early in the process, they've got this all figured out. Got a couple of more college football playoff predictions from folks as well. Here from Rabbi Thedford, Texas beats Washington. Early money is going on Washington over Texas. Have to agree over there. So it's going to be a fun college football playoff, folks. And just with that news that just dropped here on the show, transfer portal stuff tomorrow and the next day is really about to really heat up now. So kind of last thing that I want to talk about here on the show tonight, what's ahead? What's ahead this week on the channel? We're probably going to be talking a lot of transfer stuff. I would anticipate a show, I don't know about tomorrow. I would probably look for Wednesday. We might have something, right? There will be a video dropping on the channel tomorrow. We'll see about Tuesday. We might have a show on Wednesday as well. So make sure you watch out for that. I post on Twitter when there's a show coming up. If you've subscribed to the channel and have the bell, you'll get notified every time we're going live. Every time a live stream pops up as well. So I like to keep people notified on the community page and on Twitter as well what's happening coming up. We're going to start to maybe preview some of these other first bowl games and kind of start to break down. We might be bringing on some guests from Washington, maybe from Oregon. What's next for the Ducks as they approach the Fiesta Bowl? Now that Ty Thompson doesn't look like he's not going to get his audition with Bo Nix kind of playing in that Fiesta Bowl as well. Transfer stuff. I got to imagine that's going to be the big discussion now. Now that we're 3 weeks and change away from these championships, transfer. Early signing day is coming up a couple of days before Christmas. So that's going to be, it's the push. It's the push to really formulate your roster for next season. So I appreciate everybody for coming on to the live show here tonight. Some great conversation, some great comments. I very much appreciate everybody for jumping aboard. It's been a great season. I just want to send a big thank you to everybody who's watched, who's subscribed, who's liked, who's been involved in the discussion. It's been a very interesting year for the Big Ten. 4 new members. Northwestern hazing, Mel Tucker, Michigan sign stealing, and now we got the number 1 team in the country. 1 current, 1 future member in the college football playoff. It's been a wild year. It's easily been the biggest year of growth on this channel, so I appreciate everybody for caring about what I have to say. So we'll see you next week. We'll let you know when that next show is dropping. But until then, have a good one. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.